Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Mr. Dylan White.
Thank you, Paul. And the past few weeks, I've been doing songs with Mr. Dan Franklin, but he's off celebrating a birthday or whatever tonight. But here's the thing, doing all this music and celebrating all these, musicals as we have been over the past, several weeks. I know a lot of people here are, music theater fans. Um, it's really inspired me to get more into musical theater, so much so that I decided I wanted to be a musical theater producer. So that's kind of what I did, and I wanted to tell you my story of how I became a producer of musical theater. My story started when I was living on the West Side, so I guess you could say this is a West Side story. I started off as a performer, as many of you know, and that's what I was doing for the last 5 years. I've gotten to tour all over the world. I've been to Chicago, Oklahoma, the South Pacific, and Vietnam. Yeah, the conditions in the theaters weren't the best in Vietnam. There were, lots of holes in the ceiling, and it rained a lot. So we were often just singing in the rain, and so much rain would come in that the aisles would just get flooded. They'd just be like this big river. But I met some of my best friends, on that tour. There was Tommy, Oliver, Joseph. I called them the Jersey Boys, not because of why you think. They actually always wore the jersey from their favorite baseball team, those damn Yankees. Who else was there? There was Billy, Elliot, that dear Evan Hansen. I mean, it was such a great experience. I just miss Saigon. But I knew I couldn't continue to make a living as a performer. I knew producing was where it was. Because, when you're a performer, sometimes you just don't know how you're going to pay your rent. So I figured to become a producer, I just had to meet with a bunch of other producers at other theaters. I was all over on the West Coast. I went up and down Sunset Boulevard. On the East Coast, I was all up and down 42nd Street. I even went all the way out to Avenue Q. And that is actually where I met this girl named Annie, Annie Birdie. She told me that her brother George Birdie was a producer and looking for a co-producer. So well, please set up a meeting. And apparently he likes to hang out in Central Park on the weekends. So, I spent Sunday in the park with George. Turns out when I met with them, it was all just a big setup that they were planning to rob me. I get there and George was like, Annie, get your gun. I'm like, bye bye, Birdie. And I ran and hid behind the carousel until I was free to get out of there. I had one more meeting to get to at the Forum Theater. And, well, a funny thing happened on the way to the Forum. I go to get in a cab, and as I'm getting in on the other side of the cab, this lady jumps in the cab and is trying to like push me out. And the cab driver turns around and says, "Lady, you can't do that." And the lady was like, you need to get rid of him. I'm your fare now. And the cab driver was like, "No, that's my fare, lady." I said, "It's fine. We can share the cab." And it actually turned out to be more than fine. We ended up talking. She turned out to be really great. She wasn't all that wicked. Her name was Nanette, and she's actually a really funny girl. She came from a very fun home. We actually even dated for a little while. Took me back to her place. I met her cats, Matilda and Evita. And I met her sister, Kate, who actually warned me that it probably wasn't going to work out with Nanette. She apparently dates a lot. She's dated a lot of guys and dolls. Matter of fact, she kept a record of all of them. Yeah, she'd just fill up a book of all the people that, of all the men that she dated. So, she wrote all the names of the men that she dated in one book. And then when she filled that book up, she filled in another book. So yeah, she had one book of men and a book of more men. So I couldn't believe it. I mean, I turned to her sister. I said, "She won't even kiss me, Kate." And Kate said, "You never know what you're going to get with Nanette. She can be, fussy or bossy and often at the same time, which makes her, fussy." One time she just like completely changed her appearance. I was so thrown back. Like she walked in and I just went, "Mamma mia." You wouldn't believe she was wearing these kinky boots, She'd completely changed her hair. It was all teased out. At first, I thought it was like with some kind of like, hairspray. Turns out it was with some kind of grease. And she was formerly brunette. Now she was like this platinum color that I'd never seen before. But it turns out that it's a color that she'd patented. So not only was she blonde, she was legally blonde. It got to be too much. I said, we have to break up. And she was shocked. She said, how can you do this? I'm crazy for you. I said, well, you're not completely crazy, but you're definitely not next to normal. I mean, there's a light in the piazza, but, nobody's home. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Anyway, she says, what's the problem? Just don't you love me? And I said, no, Nanette. And we broke up. And it was good. It was a big distraction from me becoming a producer. So went home that night, checked my email, deleted all the junk. I get spam a lot. And I found an email from my old friend Dolly, who I haven't heard from in years. And I couldn't just email her back. I had to call her up. So I called her up. I called up Dolly, and obviously she recognized my number because she answered the phone. Hello, Dylan. You know what I said. She said, I said, I'm surprised to hear from you. I thought you were, last I heard you were off from some like spiritual quest into the woods in some secret garden, living like a gypsy. And she said, no, she's back and she's living in the Heights. I said, wait a minute. You're in town? She said, yes. And heard that I wanted to become a producer. So she had a producer friend she wanted to introduce me to, this guy, Charles Brown. And I said, I remember what happened last time. I'm like, yeah, promises. But I agree to meet Charles, and he says he wants to make sure I'm serious. He's not going to do me any sweet charity. And he says to me, you don't honestly look like the person who knows the difference between a good musical and a lame musical. And I assured him, I know what good is, and I know what lame is. Anyway, he took me on board. I joined his company, and I said, you're a good man, Charlie Brown. And we ended up producing a musical together that I think you may have heard of. It's written by none other than Luke Skywalker himself, Mark Hamill. Yeah. And it's all about the life of Mark Hamill, and it even stars Mark Hamill. Yeah, it's a ton of Mark Hamill. You could say it's a Hamilton. So I'm guessing you've heard of it. Anyway, that's my story of how I became one of the producers.
Ladies and gentlemen, throw those shoes. Just take them off. And he wasn't even singing, but throw those shoes at Mr. Dylan White.
I need to
Dylan,
know. Wait, I need to
I know
how
Steph
many
has been asking. Everybody on the comments here are like, holy monkey, holy wow. How many is that? Do you have a tally? Should we ask people to go back and count?
I tallied it up when I wrote it. I want to say it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like the mid 40s. Or like 40 something.
No, there's more than that. There's no way.
So
that was brilliant.
I think, Dylan, I think you could do every musical ever, every Broadway show ever made. I think you could do that.
I think he could in 20 minutes or less.
Yeah.
There we go.
Amazing.
The history of Broadway.
Danny will set it to music, and we'll all do it together.
Listen, I'm going to go because it's not my moment. So here's the Great White Wave.
Oh, look what you did. See what you did.
Oh, if you're at home, make some noise. Give it up for Mr. Dylan White. Amazing.